Between 1974 to 1980, political violence was common in Jamaica, and the political war was a long-standing feud between the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party. Both parties have fought control of the island for years. Citizens were so motivated by the rivalry that it divided the nation and caused a civil war in Kingston. Each side believed the other to be controlled by foreign elements. The JLP is said to be backed by the CIA, and the PNP had ties with the Soviet Union and Cuba. Throughout the 70s and the 80s, thousands were murdered due to political violence, and there was even a massacre of JLP supporters by official Jamaican soldiers. So, I want to know this. Who ordered the massacre upon the JLP supporters? Why we never learn about these atrocities in a school, and what the heck? What have we thought about this? Before Jamaica gained independence, the JLP and PNP had established themselves as Jamaica's main rival political parties by 1943. When Jamaica gained independence in 1962, just a year later, political parties were paying off gang members to engage in turf wars with political rivals. Once the JLP would come to power, they would demolish a settlement in West Kingston called Bakawal. An article from the Gleaner archive reads, Bakawal was a farmer settlement located in West Kingston, which used to be referred to as the worst slum in the Caribbean. It was a haven for criminals and the crime rate was high, and there was no social infrastructure to speak of. Residents lived in old cars and cardboard shacks. In its place, the JLP constructed Tivoli Gardens starting in 1965. The project would be monitored by Edward Siaga, making Tivoli Gardens a JLP garrison. The PNP would react by forming its own garrisons, making way for the tradition of violent garrison communities in Jamaica. By the 1966 election, gunfights became more common. There would be bombings and the police would often be shot at. This resulted in more than 500 people being injured, 20 people dead, and 500 arrests made during police raids. So we can see how violence in the 1960s was cemented in Jamaican politics, making way for more violence to come in the following years. Political violence had become a commonplace in Jamaica. Political parties began paying off crime bosses for local gang support. Assassination threats and attempts also started becoming more and more frequent. When the 1976 elections came, it was done during a state of emergency because the crime was so overwhelming. Over 100 people died leading up to the elections. In 1978, the Jamaica Defense Force went on a covert operation to eliminate 5 gang-affiliated supporters of the JLP. They were lured to the Green Bay firing range with job offers, where they were met upon gunfire by the Jamaican soldiers. A survivor that escaped told the tale in what is now known as the Green Bay Massacre. If you're interested in knowing more about the Green Bay Massacre, it will be the video that's posted after this one, so you can look out for it. And if you're liking this video so far, don't be shy, poke the like button. In 1978, political violence was so widespread in Jamrock that a One Love peace concert was organized as a means to bring the country together and to use reggae music as a uniting factor. During Bob Marley's performance, he called both Manley and Siaga to the stage. The three held up their hands together to signify their unity. Unfortunately, the event did little to quell the political violence. The event's 2 organizers were both killed within 2 years after the concert. The 9th election in Jamaica's history was unlike any in its past. The stakes were higher, the world was watching, and there were more guns. More than 889 people were reportedly killed in the again politically motivated violence during the campaign between February and October 1980. And when you check the stats, that's 500 more than the previous year, for those keeping track. A quick side note, also in 1980, 153 elderly women lost their lives in the Eventide home fire on the 20th of May, which was suspected but not proven to have been started by politically motivated arsonists. Because this happened in 1980, I thought it was worth mentioning. By the 1980s, Edward Seaga, leader of the JLP, gained control of the country and embraced a more free will policy. During the 80s, the United States declared war on drugs, and the JLP's affiliation with the US allowed the US military to eradicate cannabis fields in Jamdong. Wow, like during them time there, marijuana supposed to be the gang them bread and butter, so when them clamp down on that, them have less ways to make profit. Naturally, the gangs them became unsatisfied with the lessening of handouts given by their political leaders. So these gangs began to become more active in governing the garrison communities they controlled. As ganja disappeared, crack cocaine became more available, funding the criminal underworld greatly. The JLP-aligned gang, Showa Posse, was one of these notable gangs. The 80s saw the increased price of cocaine and marijuana as the US led the war on drugs. This meant that it provided more profit for the gangs selling it. The one-time street fighter gangs for political leaders turned themselves into drug trafficking organizations that spread out across the US, UK, and South America. The profits from the drug trade soon surpassed Jamaica's national economy. The politicians end up lost control over them former followers, the reasons the gangs were started in the first place. Yeah, so since then, there hasn't been any political civil unrest like the 60s and 70s in Jamaica. However, since gangs had to find new sources of revenue through the drug trade, they created a sophisticated criminal organization that lasted until 2010, when famed gang leader Christopher Dudu Skoke was captured and extradited by the US, which we already covered in another video. So if you found this one interesting, you don't want to miss the next one, so subscribe so you can see when it drops. Thanks for watching.